So I'm going to talk about difficult relatives, but I just want to make sure that you're all in the right room. So we'll do a little survey first. How many of you don't have to raise your hand, you can just tuck your hand behind your back or pull on your ear like the third base coach. How many of you have a family member who gets on your nerves? Okay. How many of you have a family member who you sometimes feel disappointed about, frustrated with, impatient with, or even angry? I know that you're not an angry person, but at times you have felt angry about this person. How many of you have a family member with whom you have a clash or a disagreement or a power struggle that has not gotten resolved? So what's interesting is we're in the sweet spot calendar-wise right now, and I don't know if you thought about this ahead of time, but it was the perfect timing. We're right in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Thanksgiving. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is where you go, if you do go, and they say, who do you need to forgive this year? And everybody goes, oh, shoot, do I have to deal with this again? It's the same list as last year, okay? And you try to forgive this person, and we're going to talk a little bit later about what is forgiveness. It's different from being a fool or whitewashing or forgetting. It's a different type of forgiveness that we talk about in Judaism and in therapy. And at Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, it's like, how do I let go of being the prison guard or the parole officer for somebody that I'm keeping book on? I'm keeping tabs of all the things this person does that are insensitive, hurtful, and disappointing. Could I get a different job? Could I retire from that job? And that's really what the high holidays are about. They're about letting go of the need for revenge and holding on to grudges. It's such a release so that you can start the new year with good energy and open up to lots more loving kindness. But it doesn't always happen so smoothly at the high holidays. It still lingers, and sometimes people, even if you forgive them, they find a way to get them, get back on the list of people that irritate you, pretty soon. And then we're heading toward Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is an interesting holiday. It's about thankfulness and gratitude, but it apparently is also about family mishigas, where people are saying, you didn't invite me, you did invite me, who's going to sit next to whom? Can we even have a Thanksgiving in the same house, or do we have to have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 Thanksgivings just to accommodate all the different feuds in the family? Some families don't have this. Some families have, a very soft-spoken thing where they don't talk about their differences. They don't burst out their differences. And I'll just say, I come from 2 different types of communication style. On my father's side, he's a Holocaust survivor who was born in Germany. My father, when he's pissed off, speaks slower and slower until he sounds like the governor of California. And if he speaks really, really, really slowly, he's very, very upset. And on my mother's side, my mother died when I was 14. She got cancer when I was 10. And her side of the family was Poland, Russia. And they would scream at each other. And they would throw things at each other. And they would carry on with each other because they love each other. So between those 2 communication styles, I don't know which one you live with. You might have a third version of it. But you start to notice something's going on in this family, even if they're not talking about it. And many families have the no-talk rule, where there's real tension, and people know who can't sit near whom and who can't be invited on the same nights, but they don't talk about it. Other people talk about it endlessly. They write sitcoms about it, okay? So, honor whatever your family's tradition is with this. I'm going to offer a strange approach on how to deal with difficult relatives. And some of you might think at first it doesn't make sense, or it's a little bit Pollyanna, naive, but I assure you it's very down-to-earth, gritty, and earthy, and real, and it works. Most of the time, no guarantees. So when you think about a difficult relative, you might say, why? Why is this happening to me? Why is this person still acting up? Why is this still going on in my family? How do I get it to stop? That approach doesn't work. Another approach people have is they say things like, I wish this person would change, or it would be nice if, or it wouldn't kill so-and-so if just once they would please. Any sentence that starts with, it would be nice if, or it wouldn't kill so-and-so, or I wish so-and-so would change, that usually doesn't go too far. There's a Jewish Yiddish expression that says, if you're waiting for your family member to change, you should live so long, okay? So I'm not going to urge how to change the other person dramatically. There may be some change. There may be slight improvements that we can work with. But I'm mostly going to focus on how can you change how you take good care of yourself, how you can still value life and family and to get-togethers and these holidays, even if this person doesn't change. If they do change, wonderful. But Dayenu, it would be enough if they don't change, but if you have a completely different reaction to them next time, because then the power is with you. So I'm going to explain several ways to make things change. But first I have to start with a very old expression that some of you grew up with in your family and some of you have never heard of. There's a Jewish expression that says, Gamzu Latova. Even this might possibly be for good. There was a guy 2,000 years ago named Rabbi Nachum, and he had a horrible, hard life. He had financial troubles. He had physical ailments. He had all sorts of things that happened, tragedies in his life. And he would wake up every day and he'd say, Gamzu Latova, even this might someday be for good. And he would look for how to transform his suffering and his difficulties into good things, and he was successful at it. And he was a great mentor and teacher. He was such a great mentor and teacher that one of the rabbis that he trained was Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest rabbis of all time. He was the student of this Rabbi Nachum. So there's a danger in that phrase, even this will be for good. You don't go to someone's house after they lose a loved one or after they filed for bankruptcy and say, even this will be for good. That's called insensitive and stupid, okay? What Gamzu Latova means is it's something you say to yourself. And you say, even though I can't see right now how to transform this situation, I'm open to it. I'm open to possibly finding some way to make healing or health or renewal or wisdom or learning come from even this, even this. And it's very hard in our lives. You know, many hard things have happened in my life, but one of the things, my mother's death, it was a horrible thing, and I still, you know, haven't quite recovered for it. It's only been, you know, 45 years. I'll get over it at some point. But I've gotten tremendous learning from it, and tremendous heart opening from it, and tremendous compassion, and tremendous bonding with other people going through stuff. It was a very important and in some ways transformative experience in my life that I've hopefully been able to turn for the good. In your life, the tragedies, the setbacks, the frustrations, the painful things, I'm not saying you have to rush and do it, but if you're open to the possibility of Gamzu Latova, even this might be turned into something good, sometimes it starts to appear. You start to notice it in ways you wouldn't notice it if you weren't open to that idea. If you're sure that you're a martyr or a shut-down person forever because of that, that would be a problem. One of the people who inspired me on this is one of the people I studied with many years ago, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. Dr. Frankl said, you know, they can do all sorts of horrible things to him in the concentration camps, but they can't take away my sense of purpose, my sense of dignity, my sense of humor. Those things can't be taken away from you, no matter what tragedies are happening to you. Sometimes you lose them for a while, but you get them to come back again. So bringing Gamzu Latova, even this can be for good, to the family, I'm going to talk about some ways to turn this difficult relative into something that's going to be transformative and positive for you in your life. For those of you who are already in doubt about that, hang in there another minute. The first possible way, there's going to be 7 or 8 of them, depending on how long I talk and what time I'm going to end. The first one is, you are going to learn from a master teacher what not to repeat on your kids. Okay? If you want to get really excellent education on what it means to have insensitive, hurtful, dismissive, judgmental, critical, you know, flash of anger, if you want to learn all about those things, go to the teacher. The teacher is the difficult relative. You watch them like an anthropologist or a journalist, and you say, what's going on with this person? Why do they do that? Look at the effect it has on others. I am going to make a commitment today to really do all I can. You'll break your commitment several times, but you can keep recommitting to it. I'm not going to repeat what this person does. So if you think about this person, this is an amazing person to teach you what not to do. If you want to be a humble person and they're full of ego, this is your teacher. Notice all the ways that they're self-referential, that they're tooting their horn, that they drain all the energy in the room by their domination of conversations. This person's a teacher. You can learn so many things not to do by watching them. I don't recommend sending them the Hallmark card that says, "Thank you so much. If it weren't for your insensitivity and ego, I never could have become the good parent I am today." That won't go well, okay? The doctor did not say to do that, okay? For those of you who didn't hear that right, the doctor did not say to do that. The second possible transformative, wonderful thing is that this person, and now we're getting deep here, so get ready. This person might represent some shadow self, some suppressed part of you that you don't like to look at, or some part of you that's understated and it needs to be flared up a little bit. So let's just deal with narcissism for a minute as an example of that. Let's say there's someone in your family who always has it about them. It's always on their terms, it's their way or the highway. They're very, very reactive. They don't like when anybody else interrupts or tries to have the floor. It's all about them. And that kind of narcissism, and they're always bragging about who they know, and they go to the best gynecologist in town, and they go to the best heart surgeon in town, they go here. Everything they do is the best because they're a narcissist, okay? Narcissists only associate with the best. You, peon, nah, okay. So that's kind of hard to take. But if you look at the narcissism spectrum, and you say to yourself, where am I on the narcissism spectrum? Now, maybe you're down, they're at 10 or 11 on a scale of 10, and you're down as a schlepper on 1 or 2. And you say to yourself, do I want to spend the rest of my life being at 1 or 2 on the narcissism scale? If I don't go to the obnoxious 10 or 11 that they are, what if I upped it to 3 or 4? So for me as a parent of a child with special needs, I need to up my narcissism. You were commenting before that I blush too much when people say things to me. I can't help blushing, okay? I'll deal with it. It's good for your capillaries, good for your circulation. It's uncomfortable, when people say nice things. So I'll work on that. I've got a long time to work on it. But I do need a little more narcissism when I go to an IEP, an individual educational plan meeting to fight for my kids' reading and therapy and all the things you have to get in special ed. At that meeting, I have to show up and I have to really be on my game. And I have to interrupt, and I have to make sure they don't snow me. I have to do all sorts of things in order to make sure I protect my kid. So if you're down at 1 or 2 on the narcissism scale, and there's someone in your family who's 10 or 11, you don't have to become like them, but you can say, is there a little bit more charisma? Is there a little bit more outgoingness? Even if you're an introvert, are there some times when I can fake it and be the extrovert in order to make sure I accomplish the things that my family or I need? That's one way you can benefit from having these narcissists around. You can say, what's some of the non-toxic things that the narcissist does that I'm willing to emulate? What are the toxic things I never want to imitate or emulate? Okay, on another scale, you can also explore from a person in your family, is there something that they're doing that so repulses me, and yet I guess I do it sometimes too. I don't do it as much as they do, but I do it also. And so if you have a loving partner or a friend or a counselor, you can confess to them. You can say, you know what? I was around so-and-so and I was so plugged in. I wanted to scream or kill this person or run out of the room. That drives me crazy. As soon as you hear the phrase coming out of your mouth, that drives me crazy, ask yourself the question that 9 out of 10 Jungian therapists would ask you, could that be some shadow part of you that you're uncomfortable admitting you have sometimes? So if someone's got anger and you can't stand being around an angry person, what are you like when you're angry or impatient or tired or blood sugar is low or your diabetes is acting up or whatever it is that causes you to sometimes flash with anger? Is that something you're willing to work on? So the person in your family that makes you crazy also gives you a wake-up call to say, that's something I want to work on. Now that person, most narcissists do not do therapy and they can't improve these things because they are blind to their own faults and they are also blind to empathy and they're blind to those kinds of things. But you've got a chance. You've got empathy and growth potential. You could make some growth in the areas that you need to grow on if you're stimulated by someone in your family who gets on your nerves. So whenever you're irritated by somebody, use it as an exercise. What can I learn about myself by how irritated I am by this person? Do I have some of those same traits? Okay, the next one is, There's a great phrase in Judaism, it comes from the Torah, that says, circumcise your heart. It says it several times, I think like 9 or 10 times in the Torah. What does that mean to circumcise your heart? To open up your heart, to make sure. So it's opening up to the universal flow, it's opening up to the goodness, it's opening up to the caring and the kindness. If you're with somebody who's dismissive, who's a lousy listener, who's never really present with you, and you don't like the way they treat you, then you can become a person who's constantly opening up your own heart when you're in a conversation. When I'm with my wife or my son, I know when I'm being dismissive or impatient or cut to the chase or get to the point. Those are killer words. I stopped using them years ago. If you still use those phrases, and if they're getting you in trouble, this could be the opportunity to open up your heart. You know the experience of having a difficult, insensitive relative dismiss you. Do you want to be the dismissive person? Or to the stranger on the street, or the person who's coming to you for help, or to someone who's in your workspace, someone that you work with? Are you the impatient, dismissive person who's saying, my time is too important to really make eye contact and be decent with you right now? You know, I do it for that person, but I don't do it for you. You know what that feels like from your difficult relative. Use that as the opening to see if you want to work on that trait. Working on character traits is a real important part of the Jewish life. Now, for years, only the Orthodox people did this musar, working on your character traits. But in the last 10 or 15 years, Reform and Conservative Jews have started doing it as well. Alan Morinis, M-O-R-I-N-I-S, has written books that are accessible to Reform and Conservative Jews. He studied with a Hasidic traditional person, and then he's made it accessible to the others. So if you want to learn what are the character traits that I can work on so that I don't have to lose people in my life, I don't have to alienate people in my life, your difficult relatives will give you clues as to what those traits are, because they're the things that make you crazy or irritated. Or sometimes people will actually point them out to you. There are family members who will point out all of your traits, you know, free of charge whenever you're available. Okay, which brings us to the next one. You can learn what inappropriate, invasive advice giving is about by watching your difficult relative. If you've got a relative that's always commenting about your weight or your health or your job or your income or your place settings aren't right or your kids aren't well behaved or whatever it is that they comment on that makes you go, why did I even think of coming here tonight? That's a chance for you to figure out, do I want to improve that trait as well? And the trait of being an appropriate, sensitive, caring person when you're giving advice. I know that with my wife is totally allergic to advice. And apparently men tend to try to fix things and give advice. I don't know anything about that, but apparently it's a reputation we have. So early on in our relationship, I figured out the way to prevent 90% of our fights is if I ask her this question. I'll say to her, you know, she's talking about something she's upset about or concerned about or she has to process with her best friend. And I'll say to her, did you want me to just shut up and listen, or did you want advice, or did you want to brainstorm together on what to do? What would you like? I don't know the answer. You know, I'm well-trained, I'm an intuitive person, I've got a lot of empathy, but I don't know which one she wants today. So I ask her, and she tells me. It's a wonderful system. You might want to try it. This issue of not knowing is something I want to just do a quick detour on. There's a wonderful thing that happened to me when I was being trained as a Gestalt therapist, which means seeing the person as a whole person, and you get to be a whole person in the therapy session. The teachers told this story. There was this incredible Gestalt therapist who was really sensitive and empathic and kind, and he was with this woman early in the morning, and her father had died, and they were having this wonderful session where she was grieving and crying, and they just really connected. It was a beautiful session. That night, he was walking down the street, and he saw her on a phone, and she was crying. And so he went up next to her, and he's so empathic, and he's so intuitive, and he's so kind, and he said to her, you know, I know what you're feeling, and I'm so sorry for what you've lost, you know. And she says, hold the phone. She said, hold the phone to the person. And she says, I'm not crying because of what we talked about this morning. I'm laughing at the joke this person just told me on the phone. The reason this is an important story for therapists and for all of us is that we are often wrong in our assumptions. So one of the things you're also going to get as a benefit from working with a difficult relative is that you might be wrong about how you've analyzed them, categorized them, dismissed them, figured them out, think you know what they need. If you walk in with an agenda, with that person who's estranged from you or estranged from the family or that you've got tension with, and you know what they have to do to change, and you know what they have to do to fix the situation, and you know what's the right answer, you've just lost the battle. But if you walk in with humility and you say to someone, teach me, that's a humble place to be. Teach me, you say. You and I have been missing the last several times we've gotten together. I've hurt your feelings, you've hurt my feelings. If it's a borderline or narcissistic person, you might leave that second line out, you've hurt my feelings, because that might set them off. But at least the first part you can say, I know I've hurt your feelings, and I feel really bad about that. Teach me, what can we do to stop getting into these messes with each other? What are some of your ideas? And you brainstorm together as allies who are two smart people in the dark wilderness together trying to figure it out. That is so different from, let me tell you what I think you need to work on. Let me tell you what I think you could do. Or would it kill you if you just once you would call? So those phrases tend to alienate the person. The teach me phrase, which is hard to get into that humble place. And that might be the character trait you need to work on. We are very humble people sometimes. And sometimes we pretend to be humble, but we're not so humble. There's a wonderful quote from Golda Meir. She said, don't act so humble. You're not so great. Okay? Learning to have the humility to come to someone and say, you and I don't know how to fix the problem between us, but we certainly could brainstorm together. That's a whole opening. It doesn't always work. It might bring on some flashes of anger from the person. Who knows what's going to happen? But it works a lot better than telling them what to do. Okay, a couple more, and then I'm going to open up for questions, comments, and reactions. Another thing you're going to get from this person is you're going to get a master course in how to set limits lovingly. There's a wonderful teaching in Judaism from the Sephirot, the energies that come from God, that on the one hand is chesed, loving kindness, on the other hand is gevura, limit setting. And right in the middle is tiferet, beauty, harmony, balance. On any given day with a difficult relative, whether you live with this person or you see this person once in a while, you're doing a phone call with this person, you will be tested. Do I lean too much in the direction of loving kindness? I'm a doormat for this person. Do I lean too much in terms of rigid limit setting? I'm a hard, I won't say the word starts with A, ends in SS, but am I too hard with this person? Is that what's going on between us? Yes, you're right. And if you called Dr. Laura on the radio, she would tell you you're right, but which family members does she get along with, okay? So, and I apologize, that was Lashon Hara, and I apologize, but it's documented. She gives advice to people to just cut this person out of your life and tell this person off, and a lot of families get hurt by that stuff. So if that works for you, great. If that tough love approach has been working for you, go for it. But if it's causing people to become even more recalcitrant and stubborn and alienated from you, try a different strategy. The different strategy is, where you come to this person and you say, I don't know how to fix the problem. Let's explore it together. And that's an opening that the person's never had. They might not trust you at first. They might think that this is a setup, but you'll see. You'll see what happens. You're going to learn the limit setting and the loving kindness and how to have a balance between those two. I'll just give you one quick example. I have an aunt who is a wonderful person sometimes, and she's also very difficult most of the time. She's gotten to the place now where everyone's alienated from her. No one calls her anymore. She's very, very lonely and unhappy. And I have a loyalty to her because when my mother was dying, she sometimes took me to things, and she was kind to me. And so besides the fact that I care about her, I love her, and she's had a hard life, I also have a loyalty to her. And she's really difficult. A phone call with her, and I call her often, masochist or therapist, we don't know. So I call her often, and she is one of those people, you might have one of these in your family, she's not complete with the conversation until she gives you a zets and finds the place where she can hurt you, okay? So usually if she can hurt me by insulting what I do for a living, or that I'm too skinny, or that I have some food allergies, she always goes to these things quickly. If she sees she doesn't get a rise out of me, she will then try to attack my son. She says, does your son still have problems? And I'll say, Well, I think he's going to have a lot of issues for the rest of his life, and we love him, and he's amazing. So we'll go back and forth. And she still hasn't seen that she's gotten a rise out of me. And then I try to change the subject and try to connect with what she's going through and what her life is about. And I set goals. This is one more thing about dealing with difficult relatives. I set goals. The experience used to be that a 15-minute phone call with her was 14 minutes of pain and 1 minute of pleasure. Now we're up to 7 and 7. I have 7 minutes of, I really care about her, and she's kind of an interesting character, and she's led a very interesting and complicated life. I'm enjoying this conversation. And I have 7 minutes of, oh my gosh, I can't believe she's so insensitive that she could say the very thing I talked to her about last time. So there's 7 minutes of both. 7 is 700 times, what I had before. I only had 1 minute of pleasure before. I'm up to 7. I may at some point, her birthday is this week, I'm calling her probably tomorrow, I may get it up to 8. I'll let you know. That's a success. I urge you to have the successes by setting realistic goals. One more thing about realistic goals is when there's a simcha, a bar mitzvah, a bat mitzvah, a wedding, a Passover Seder, or some other thing, set realistic goals. The goal might be, and Rabbi Laura Geller was the one who married us in Los Angeles, and she said, set a budget that the first 10 things that happen that are a little bit strange and goofy and out of control at your wedding and it's not what you expected, that's still okay, that's within budget. If it gets to be more than 10, we'll worry about it then, okay? And she said that at her wedding, her mother went off about her shoes. She didn't like her shoes, and she wasn't going to. So we thought, oh, well, this isn't going to happen to us. But 2 nights before the wedding, my father-in-law backed out of the wedding because my wife had decided that she wanted to walk halfway down the aisle by herself because she'd been on her own for 30 years or 25 years, and she wanted to walk halfway down with her parents. She didn't want her father giving her away in the traditional form, even though he got to be the second half person who does give her away. That was what she designed. She's the bride. She gets to have this input. That was a deal breaker for him. Okay? So we had to have a lot of summits and sessions. He had a good time at the wedding, but it was pretty intense for the 2 days that he'd pulled out of the wedding, and we weren't sure what to do. Stuff happens around weddings, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, Passover Seders, Rosh Hashanah, break the fast at Yom Kippur. Stuff happens, and you get to decide what's your definition of a success. If it's better than last year, if it only had 5 interesting moments, whereas last year had 7, we're 20. We're 2 out of 7, much better. You get to use your sense of humor and your sense of irony in these situations. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to open it up. The other thing I want to say is there's a beautiful spiritual teaching that we have in Judaism, and most religions and traditions have that as well. That there's a pure soul inside each person. And with your difficult relative, if you can do enough research as to what happened in their life, or what were they born with genetically, that this person has so many different things blocking your ability to see their pure soul. That's an interesting project. You can spend days, weeks, or months on it. You can write a dissertation about it, okay? You can even create a whole profession around it. Some have. So I urge you to find out where is the pure soul inside this person. You might have to find a childhood picture of this person. You might have to find a time before they were as wounded as they are now, or as difficult as they are now. But if you can connect with that pure soul, or if you can see that pure soul in one or both of their eyes, or in one of their interesting character traits, or one of the things they do, that's a holy moment. Then you don't have to be the prison guard and the probation officer always keeping book on all the things they do wrong, because you can connect with their pure soul. And so your neshama, your pure soul, connecting with their pure soul, even if they're not in the mood to do that, that's a beautiful moment. And if you have 5 or 10 or 15 quality minutes with that person, that's a beautiful thing, because they're not going to be around forever. And even though you had to protect yourself against all the hostile and toxic things they do, to connect with that person's pure soul is a beautiful thing. And rather than critiquing them for all the things they do wrong, is there some way that you can find a way to appreciate this person's a work of art, this person is an amazing soul who has come down to earth to teach me all these skills that I'm going to use at work and at home and with family. What a blessing this person has been for me. They are the teacher that I couldn't have lived without. So now I'm open to any questions, comments, disagreements, or hostile remarks. Go ahead.
So very practically, Len, when you prepare for your next Thanksgiving dinner, do you seat all the difficult people at one end of the table or intersperse them among the others? Or alternatively, do you let your wife worry about it?
Well, I'm more of the cook than she is at Thanksgiving. I make the gluten-free stuffing. This is California. Okay, but it's made out of that Ezekiel bread they have at the Whole Foods store. So anyway, what I'm working on for this Thanksgiving is that my son, who has special needs and is very vulnerable, has to deal with a certain uncle who's very, very aggressive. That uncle was put down by his father, and he feels it's his mission in life to put down other people because that's how you toughen them up. So I have been on pins and needles and eggshells for years protecting my son against this person. But as of 2 years ago, I started to breathe at Thanksgiving, which is a whole new experience for me. You know, I teach breathing exercises to people, but I wasn't breathing at Thanksgiving. And I began to breathe because I talked to my son. I said, you know, you're old enough now. If this particular uncle starts to get in your face and say things that hurt you, I want you to either leave the room gently without making a scene or comment, I'm okay, don't worry about me. And it worked. And I'll just tell you, for humor's sake, what happened the first year is that I primed my son, you know, you're going to be speaking up for yourself this year. I'm not going to be your protector this year. And I had a much more relaxing Thanksgiving. At the end of the evening, my son went up to this guy as he was saying goodbye. He says, you know, tonight you didn't do any of the mean things you usually do. God bless the child who has no inhibition, okay? And this person had no clue what my son was talking about, but boy, did we have a good time overhearing that, okay? Anybody else, questions, comments?
Could you elaborate on the use of humor to diffuse or the impact of what is obviously obnoxious behavior by this other difficult person? You only touched lightly upon it. I'd like to hear a little bit more.
So using humor to diffuse things. Now, every family's got different rules about humor. Some families have humor can be stated out loud. Aggressive, hostile humor is appropriate in some families, inappropriate in some families. My feeling is humor is a silent thing that I use with myself or with significant others to diffuse, but I try not to humiliate anyone in public with humor. Humor can be very cruel. But you get to decide what the rules are in your family with your situation. But humor is amazing. Yesterday when I was speaking to the social workers, I talked about the humor of trying to find the hidden love underneath the guilt-inducing comment. So when someone says to me, the woman there, she had this great example. Her mother would call her and say, you know, all the other mothers at the home, their daughters call, and they don't even know if I have a daughter, okay? So there's two humorous approaches to that you can use your humor. One is, you got to appreciate that was an incredibly well-constructed line. You know, Seinfeld and Larry David don't do any better than that line. Okay, that's good stuff. You know, Everybody Loves Raymond. Those are, you know, yeah, it was an Italian family, right? Phil Rosenthal, Italian family. Okay, so that's an amazing moment. She can construct a guilt-inducing line that has that much perfection to it. Use your sense of irony and humor just to appreciate that. Second thing is, let's play Where's Waldo, or where's the hidden love in that? Where's the hidden love in that? She's saying to you, I love you, I miss you, I need you, and I'm even willing to go ugly to convince you of how much I love you, miss you, and need you. That's good stuff, okay? So finding the humor in those moments, those Yiddishkeit moments, okay, that's a healing moment. The goal, I forgot to mention this goal, one of the goals can be, if you have always felt 2 years old or 15 years old, those are two very reactive times in life. If you always feel 2 years old and 15 years old, even though you're 72, when you're around certain people, the goal could be, could I at least be a little closer to my chronological age this time when I'm around that person? And if that's your goal and you succeed at it, you say, you know, I didn't quite feel my age, but I didn't feel 2 or 15 this time. Success. That was a success. You know, take yourself out for ice cream or whatever you want. Okay, one question? Comment? In the back, go ahead.
Let me say how much I liked your presentation. I was at various times during presentation you alluded to the Jewish tradition, and if we look at our patriarchs and their families, they have been the most dysfunctional. It's very difficult to see in some families so much dysfunctionality. So you feel encouraged that in spite of that, they prevailed. But it's not clear, how did prevail. I mean, you get the two, you get the negative and the positive together. So do you think that this can be used, in an effective way in therapy, considering this
Absolutely.
dichotomy?
The stories that we get in the Torah are such vivid stories of families that are struggling with the issues that we struggle with. Last Saturday morning, I was in Los Angeles. I was at my Musar class that I go to every week with Rabbi Miriam Hemrel. She was raised Orthodox in Israel, and she runs this congregation, and we can't figure out what we are. We're sort of Reformed Conservative Orthodox, but we all get along. And in the class, she was teaching about how she's had a conflict with one of her siblings in Israel. And she said that she was so comforted and so inspired by reading Jacob and Esau. And how how they come together around their fathers. There's so much about how do people separate. They're afraid of each other. They're quivering. They reconnect around the death of a loved one. There is such beauty in the reconciliations and the pain that we see in our stories. If those are the metaphors that work for you, great, use them. They're beautiful stories, and there's such a sense of how do you honor a parent when a parent is very difficult? How do you honor a sibling when a sibling is very difficult? These are hard issues. Forgive yourself for how hard that is. Oh, by the way, I said earlier I was going to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean whitewashing or forgetting. In Judaism, it usually means letting go of the need for revenge, letting go for the need to carry grudges. It's about opening up your heart, but also remembering. It's forgive and remember. Remember what this person is like, so that you don't set yourself, you don't want the abusive person babysitting for your kids, okay? And you don't want to go to someone who is cruel and critical when you're vulnerable. Find somebody who's good with you when you're vulnerable. Don't say, "Are you my mommy?" And they're not your mommy. They're your critic, okay? So you get to make those decisions. The Torah has these stories, and we need wonderful teachers, and sometimes we find the wonderful teachers who can flesh out those stories and make them come alive and realize, wow, these are the things that are alive today in our families. For other people, they're allergic to the Torah, so they have to find it in other places. Whatever works for you is fine, as long as you make sure that a lot of people have walked this journey before you. A lot of people will walk this journey after you. And don't put yourself down that it's taking a long time. Sometimes therapy clients come to me in their 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they say, why am I still working on my family issues? I say, because you're alive. It's a good thing. And give yourself credit. You've peeled off 72 layers already of your family stuff. You've only got 32 more. You should live a long life. Let's say healthy. Please don't put yourself down that these issues are hard, and some of the estrangements in our families take a long time and never get resolved. What can get resolved is if you can feel some love for their pure soul, even if you don't want to be around them. And that takes us always to the Fiddler on the Roof line. Rabbi, is there a prayer for the Tsar? Yes, may the Tsar be happy and healthy, far, far from us. There are family members that you're not able to be around because they're too toxic. And hopefully you'll take a sabbatical from them, and maybe someday you can reconcile with them. Maybe something will open up their heart and your heart. I always keep the door open. As long as there's life, there's hope. But if you need a sabbatical, if you need to protect yourself, there's something honorable about that. And the Torah has several stories of people who had to go into isolation or sabbaticals before they could heal enough to come back to that family. Joseph is one of those stories. Okay, so I'm going to close now because of time. I'm available. They're going to have me sign copies of Here I Am outside. But mostly, I want to wish you all good luck and Yasher Koach, God's strength, as you deal with whatever family stuff you deal with, because families really are important. Thank you.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jim, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.